So this book that we're using, the geometry book, we don't really use it, but my lessons are based off of it. Each chapter typically has 6 sections. So we usually do section 1, section 2, section 3, do a little review quiz break, and then we do the second half. So this is the first day of the second half of the chapter. We're looking at parallel and intersecting lines and planes. We'll have 2 more sections this week, do some protractor stuff, and then start reviewing for our test. Any questions before we get rolling?
Hold up.
All right, we have 3 vocabulary words to start us off. Intersecting lines, parallel lines, and skew lines. You need all 3 definitions. I'll give you a couple minutes, then we'll talk about what each one looks like. All right, so intersecting lines are 2 or more lines that meet at a point or points. So basically, lines that cross each other. That's an example of intersecting lines. And since they're lines, I'll put arrows on each of the ends. All right, parallel lines are when they're in the same plane, but they're not going to intersect. So remember, a plane's a flat surface. So they run right alongside each other. They're never going to intersect one another. They're in the same plane, though. That's key. Thank you. Now, the last one is the hardest one, skew lines. Skew lines don't intersect, but they don't intersect because they're not even in the same plane. So, like, do you see the chalk tray right here? Imagine that's a line that goes on and on and on forever. Do you see this line right up here? Those don't intersect, but they're not parallel. They're not even on the same flat surface. They're like nowhere near each other. Okay? Those are skew lines. So there's 2 ways lines cannot intersect. They can be parallel, like the sides of a train track, running right alongside each other. Same plane, same flat surface. Or they can be skew lines, which are just like way far apart, not even going anywhere near the same direction as one another. Totally separate planes. Skew. Skew lines are very hard to draw, so I'm not even going to try. Any questions? Here's my favorite example of skew lines. So if you're on this road down here, you know, like a highway overpass, these would be skew lines. How one road sort of goes over the other road in a different direction. They're not intersecting. The roads aren't crossing each other. They're like totally separate levels. Okay, those would be skew lines. Questions? All right, we got a couple more vocabulary terms and then we'll be good. The first one is length. I think that's probably one you're pretty familiar with. When you measure things with a ruler, that's length. Or the distance between 2 points. I'm going to drive 5 miles, that's a length. So length in geometry is just the distance between the endpoints of a segment. And then if they're congruent segments, that means they have the same length. And the way we show that things are congruent in geometry, we mark them in the same way. So if I put like 2 tick marks and 2 tick marks, that means those are congruent. There's also a symbol for being congruent. It's kind of like an equal sign, but it has a little squiggle on the top. Sorry, lots of writing today. So here are 2 things. These are definitely on the test. I can see the questions in my head from last year. If 2 lines intersect, they intersect to form a point. So, intersecting lines, these 2 would intersect at point P. If you have 2 planes that intersect, planes are flat surfaces. Like where the front wall meets the floor, there's a whole bunch of points where those meet. It forms a line, actually. So 2 planes intersect to make a line. And again, just think of where the wall meets the floor. That whole baseboard, that would be the line of intersection. All right, so number 1, A says, name the intersection of line PS and line QR. So this is one of those lessons where it might be a really good idea to grab a crayon or a marker or a highlighter and trace the lines. So line PS, find the line with the points P and S on it. That's this guy right here. Where does that line intersect with QR? QR. So the two lines I have drawn over in red, what's the point where they cross each other? Point R, right there. So our answer will be R. Any questions? So you just basically trace the two lines and see what the closest letter is to where they're crossing each other. All right, I'll get rid of that. We'll do the next one in, let's say, blue. TV. So this line has the T and the V on it. And line QU. QU. So where do those two cross each other? Point U, right there. All right. And the final example for this slide, PS is here, UV is here. Where do those two intersect? They do not. So yeah, you could say these lines are parallel, or you could just say lines don't intersect. Or you could say none, or you could say NA, or you could draw an empty set symbol, all right? Lots of options. I would just probably say lines don't intersect, or none. All right, this can be a pencils down example, because I think by the time you draw these planes, you just won't even know what you're looking at. So we'll just do this one out loud. And when two planes intersect, remember they form a line. So our answer should all be line so-and-so, line so-and-so, okay? So plane S, so I'm going to look for the plane that has an S in the corner. So the gray plane, all right, this guy right here. Where does that plane intersect with plane R? So the one with an R in the corner. So their intersection will be a line. Does anyone see the line where they intersect? Line K would be our answer. Line K. All right, so the next one says plane R and plane T. So plane R is the top white plane. Plane T is the bottom white plane. So it kind of looks like the ceiling and the floor, right? Where do those intersect? Nowhere. They don't, okay? So you could just say planes don't intersect. That's impossible to see. Yeah, we'll just say none. That makes it a little easier. None. All right, and then we have plane T, so the bottom plane. Get a different, can you see yellow on that? So plane T, this guy, and plane S, the gray one. Where do those intersect? Kind of like a floor, a ceiling, and a wall slicing through them. Can you see what line they intersect at? I did that one in yellow. Sorry, lots of colors. Line. It's an L. I think 1L-I. I'm not sure. I think it's an L. Usually a lowercase. All right. Questions? No questions. What? Line K is the intersection of R and S, the top white plane. So the bottom one, T, is line L. These are kind of tricky. You got to step back and visualize for a second. All right, that's it for today. So let's summarize real quick. What did we learn about
Line.
today? Very good. I'll even shorten it. We learned about intersections. If you want to say intersections of lines and planes, you can. But it was all about intersections today. So, any questions before we pass out the homework?